March 2014, and this is a meeting of the Texas Low-Level Radioactive Waste Disposal Compact Commission. If you don't expect that, you're in the wrong place. And welcome everyone, I'm glad you're here. This morning we have one of our Vermont representatives, Dr. Sanders, is with us. Eric Doyle is with us. I'm Bob Wilson. Karen Watkins is to my right. She's with the Attorney General's office. And then Brandon Hurley, Judge Dolgener, Linda Morris, and down at the end, John Salzman. Our two technical people tend to stick together. To my far left is Lee Ing, of course, who's our contract executive director. And Audrey is running around. There she is, right in front. We want to welcome everybody this morning. We do have a quorum. We only have one representative from Vermont, but and the judge is leaving to give the glasses, but we still have a quorum, even in his departure. And so normally we've introduced the commissioners and our contract people. And then I noticed Representative Burnham is here. Good morning, Representative Burnham. Are any other, do we have representatives of other elected officials in the audience? We like to recognize them if they're here. Other than the judge, of course, Judge Dolgener. And if not, do we have any people from the press here this morning? Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. This morning's meeting is also a little bit unusual because it is being recorded, as is our custom. We don't keep minutes, we keep recordings of meetings, but we are not simulcasting it. So if the people are not here, they will not be able to participate until we post the proceedings on our website. We typically convert them and post them on our website so everybody can see and hear what goes on. So thanks to all of you for being here this morning. And that takes care of the first three items on the agenda. The next is item number 4, which is public comment. And this is our agenda item allows anybody to talk to us for as long as I care to let them go on about anything that they have to say, but we also allow anybody in the public to register and comment on any particular agenda item also. So Representative Burnham, I understood, do you want to make some remarks to us this morning? And if so, please go forward. And thank you for being here again.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for making this a little closer to home for me. Although it's certainly not as pretty as it would be in Vermont. Once again, I'm Lon Burnham, and I have monitored the activities and creation of this commission for longer than most of you may have been aware that there was going to be a commission. In the legislative process in 2003, when the enabling legislation was passed to set this commission up, I warned and admonished people then in the legislative process that the legislation itself was too loosely crafted and that it would lead to what I thought would be the inevitable occasion that we are now looking at, which is Texas is going to become the nation's nuclear waste dump, which totally violates the original concept of the compact legislation passed by Congress. So with each commission, whether I've been able to attend the meetings or not, I have noticed that your decisions are fulfilling exactly what I warned and raised concern about back in 2003. We're headlong going toward being the nation's nuclear waste dump site, in spite of some very real and legitimate concerns about the siting of this particular facility and the management of the facility right next door, the WIP facility. We should be trying to learn from what's going on at WIP, not ignore, not bury our heads, and not recognize that because of the evolution of this process over the last decade, North Texas, the community I've lived in all my life, except for when I was born next to the WIP site, North Texas is going to be the transportation route for about 90% of the nation's nuclear waste. And there's been virtually no planning with regards to safety and transportation. There's been virtually no attempt to address the legitimate concerns about the inability to keep the facilities dry. Even in dry West Texas, we have holes full of water and they keep refilling. And we suspect that it's not because of high rainfall in North Texas, in West Texas. We suspect it's because the facility is over an aquifer. Yet there's been no attempt to address these concerns. So while I'm glad you're here in North Texas, I'm really disappointed in both the process and the product. The process is incrementally, we're letting happen what many of us warned about in 2003. With each successive meeting of this commission, you were opening the doors wider and wider to more and more facilities in direct contradiction to the intent of the legislation passed by Congress establishing the compact process. And one has to be suspicious. All of my political life, people have admonished, follow the money. If you want to know why the decisions are being made, follow the money. And we know that this particular meeting site is particularly convenient for the one monopoly that controls the process here in Texas. And I mean the entire process. It's not supposed to be the case that a private sector monopoly manipulates every decision-making process. And that has become the case, in part because I think the commissioners have failed to stand up to and question. Now, staff that stand up to and question, such as TCEQ, recommending against this particular location, no longer are staff. Commissioners that have raised the strongest questions about the process and the product are no longer on this commission. One can't help but wonder if there's a direct correlation. So I'm here to say that I'm going to be even more vigilant in monitoring this commission, and I'm going to make the next Vermont meeting because I like an excuse to go to Vermont.
I can tell you a good hotel.
And I wasn't going to complain publicly about not being able to get in the door where you're supposed to be able to get into, or the facilities in general. But, you know, maybe you can do a better job. I know that your budget is really, really, really limited. It's outrageous that you have only a consulting executive director. It's outrageous that the state has decided to do what it's going to do with so little funding for what is an incredibly important project. A project that in the end represents the worst of corporate socialism in this country. You know, I might be in favor of socialized medicine, and I might be in favor of socialized other services, but I am absolutely opposed to the corporate socialism that's going on here, where in the end, the public, the people I represent, are going to bear the burden of the bad decision-making process that has gone on both at the TCEQ and in the legislature, as well as this particular commission. So to hell with corporate socialism. I'm sick and tired of it, and I'm going to start calling it what it is. I am sick and tired of people influencing the process contrary to the best interest of the public. And that's all I have seen since 2003. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative Burnham. I don't want to get into an exchange, but I'll make a couple of observations. One is that Judge Dolgener and I have been on the Compact Commission since it was first formed. And I do want to observe that I'm probably one of the loyal opponents. And throughout the time I've been here, I have raised questions about WCS and some of their things. And I want to defend the commission from that respect. Two other things. First is we have to act in accordance with the compact, because that gives us our charter. As I have observed in the past in various venues, the state of Texas owns this site. TCEQ is the owner of the property and of the waste going there. And it's also the landlord, and it's the license, it's the regulator for the site. Texas, under the compact, chose to establish the site using that technique, which the legislature is entitled to do. Certainly, I'll defend you and your cohorts in the legislature's ability to do that. The last thing I want to observe is that this year, beginning this year, and probably somewhat in the prior session, we do have an appropriation that allows us to do things. We do not have employees because we are not. The question has always arisen whether if we had employees, they would be state of Texas employees, and that's something we wanted to avoid. And so we do have money to hire additional help, and we are probably, you'll hear some discussion about that today, because we're looking at hiring additional contractors to assist us in performing our duties. But as usual, thank you, sir, for your observations and for your insight and for your monitoring of our activities. We always welcome that. We want to be public in what we do and our discussion about it, and because that's the only way the public is going to have confidence in any of this kind of proceeding, is if everybody knows all the relevant facts. And if the one offer I want to make is if you think there's something that is going on that we should monitor that we're not, we'd appreciate your calling it to our attention and the background for it. And secondly, we want our deliberations and discussions to be public, and that's the reason we post so much on our website. We want to make them available to the public. And I'll give you an opportunity, Representative, to respond to anything I've said in case you wish to.
I'll just take the opportunity to respond to one thing, and I do hold you in utmost respect, and you have asked some good questions over the years. However, the issue of the water has not been addressed. The last time I addressed the commission, it was about the water. It's very clear to me that the whistleblowers at the TCEQ were right. This is the wrong location, and you keep piling on to the problem rather than addressing the problem. And I'll be glad to keep pointing out your shortcomings and errors, but at least I thought you would listen.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Go ahead, Danny Sanders.
I think I've been a broken record here talking about the aquifer, and I'm sorry. Oh, okay, I'll just move it. I'll take it. No, okay. Okay. I think I've been a broken record at this meeting talking about the aquifers and about safety and about transportation. WCS has provided us with a number of reports. I think it's great that outside organizations and representatives of the people are on top of this and welcome your input. I ask you to give us more concrete, practical, verified reports. I've read all the reports that have come in. I've also read the reports the WCS has done, and I've also done quite a bit of my own research. And I have some continuing concerns, but there is no smoking gun here. There is scientists or people who are paid by the state to oversee these things have adequate answers, have had adequate answers to kick the ball down the road every time. So if there are people out there that have adequate information that is verifiable, that can be something that we need to look at, I know that this commission would look at it. But as the chairman stated, this commission is not in charge of the waste dump. This commission has a prescribed raison d'etre. So I just ask you to ensure that the information that is given to the commission is accurate, verifiable, and scientific, and we will follow it. Not just the money, but follow the science. So I'm proud to be a member of this commission. I'm impressed with the integrity of each and every person, whether we come at from a different point of view. It's still, on the other hand, I am very concerned about aquifers, and I don't have, there's no there that has been shown yet. There's things that I still have questions about, but.
Thank you, Dr. Sanders. Does any other commissioner want to make any comments? Okay. We have another member of the public.
This is a member of the public. Would anyone mind if I move that table? The one that's blocking the exit?
I do not mind.
Would somebody? That's the outside though. It's just a minor thing, but I don't know if you followed what happened in Austin last night, so I'm just thinking of you folks. So would
Fine.
somebody give me a hand?
What happened in Austin last night?
Is this okay if we put this?
I don't know if something else happened in Austin. Probably could have.
Something terrible. Sounds like there was a fire or something. Yeah.
I went
Good
in.
old South by Southwest.
Yeah.
It must have been somewhere.
I had to really push hard to get.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank
No,
you.
that's okay. We want to be safe.
All right.
Safety first.
Oh, you mean,
Clarification, please.
yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, it was a few minutes late. I already had another meeting this morning. What is the process?
Can you identify yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Susie Bell Gosley with the League of Women Voters.
Hang on, Susie.
Yeah, they got Mike goes to us. I mean,
The projections forward.
yeah.
It's working. It's on.
Could you clarify how we sign up to speak?
Just do it.
You just,
I just volunteered.
at the beginning of the meeting, we just ask anybody who cares to address us to come forward.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gosley.
I am Susie Bell Gosley, speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Texas. The League is concerned about the Texas Low-Level Radioactive Waste Disposal Compact Commission not ensuring policies that incorporate adequate safeguards for the environment and public health with a strong role of public participation. There are several issues, you wanted specificity, that have not been consistent with the democratic society and the public interest in safety. The commission has not developed a website that's easy for citizens and legislators to find information that is helpful for making informed decisions that affect their safety and the state's finances. Recent safety issues and accidents at radioactive storage sites have proven careful oversight is of the utmost importance. Notices, and I mean really truly citizen-friendly, notices of commission meetings are not widely distributed. The commission has not urged the Department of State Health Services to designate transportation routes through Texas on road or rail that protects Texas health, the air, water, and land resources. Radioactive waste can be stored on site where it was generated in appropriate casks and not create additional hazards through transportation. Commission decisions are not widely communicated to the media and the public, which leads to public information and informed decision-making. The League's approach to nuclear issues is one of problem solving. Our aim is to work constructively for the maximum protection of public health and safety and the environment, and for citizen participation in the decision-making process at all levels of government. The League opposes increased reliance on nuclear fission, but recognizes its place in the nation's energy mix. The league states that storage of high-level waste from commercial reactors should be maximized at reactor sites. The LWV Texas supports an active state role in the high-level waste decision-making process. This commission was approved by the legislature as a low-level radioactive waste storage site. So that participation of the public to transition into high-level has been reported in the news, and we believe that this should be a state decision. The LWV Texas is persuaded that public understanding and cooperation are essential to the responsible and responsive management of our nation's natural resources and public health. The issues mentioned have been expressed during the creation of the Compact Commission and several times hereafter. I would like to say that a starting point is to recognize bluntly that radioactive materials are unhealthy. It privatizes gains, but socializes the health and environmental costs. Thank you for addressing the issues mentioned to ensure safety of Texans. Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Yes.
Well, that's a,
Go ahead.
go through our chairman.
Go ahead,
I'd just
Judge.
kind of like to hear from you about what's wrong with the website that you can't.
Well,
Well, I mean, I was just sitting here thinking, and I'm the county judge. The state, probably starting 8 years ago, we used to get books from every agency about what they were doing. They would be that thick. They're still in my office from 3 administrations ago. Well, now you gotta get on the internet and download anything that you want. The state doesn't give those books anymore. So what I've had to do in my office is go to each department that affects me, agriculture, TCQ, highway department, and get on their website and go in there and download and click on everything I want, so they'll send me the stuff. And I don't know if ours will do that or not, and that's what I was asking. If the people in this room who probably followed us ever since Chairman I've been here or before, if you wanted to do that, you could do that. That's what I was asking, that it would notify you, because I get probably 75 emails from state agencies every day, and 2 of those may really affect me, and the rest of them are just hardware, but that I don't have to worry about. But as a county official, that's what I was trying to get, because you brought the point that the public can't, you know, and I'm just trying to weasel that down so we could fix the website.
well, basically, you answered my question with your question, because you should not have to email somebody else to provide information for you. You, as members of this commission, should be able to go onto that website and easily find things. And if you can't even find them, and you know the system better than a citizen who may be concerned or interested on a route or transportation route, any number of issues, then how can they know who to even email to request the documents? So my point is made by your statement, that if you have difficulty finding things, a citizen who has less knowledge of the organization and of the issue is going to have doubly a difficult time to find the information. And that's part of a democratic society.
I would say
is
to
having
that citizen,
access.
they're just gonna have some stamina to work themselves through the system.
Well, Sears has figured it out. Macy's has figured it out. You know, there are lots of sites that you order online and they work beautifully. I think there are professionals who can help with the website. It does take some funding, but, you know, your organization should be fully funded to ensure the success of safety and public health and protecting the environment. The costs of not doing that are so great that it would really put the name of mud on the whole state of Texas, even though we're in a drought. So just that is one of those areas that creates transparency, and it's education. So in order to have legislators even make informed decisions, they need to be able to have that access. And it's time also. If it's more time taken for a legislator or a staff member to have to look up and then keep on emailing and make a few more phone calls, then it creates a difficulty. It's a barrier to information. The other side of it is that sometimes a person, I know that when you were having you had your documents at the original creation of the commission, and I had difficulty finding it, and I emailed the executive director of the commission and had it emailed to me, and I started to learn how to use the website. But reading that material then creates more questions. And when we look at how we can build sustainable communities and solve community problems, actually citizens have knowledge that may help you. And if they have access to those documents and they have their questions, it may trigger a question for you that you have never asked yourself. And it will create a more safe system for storage in our state.
Ms. Gosling, let me just say, first of all, that the two people who manage most of what we put on our website are both here today. If you would like to talk to them, you can talk to Ms. Farrell or Ms. Ing. They're here, and they'll be glad to listen to your suggestions.
Okay.
Secondly, we do have a contract with somebody to manage our website,
Well,
but they need direction. And
Yes.
I will confess to you that I have trouble navigating the TCEQ website. So
Amen.
I can totally understand the frustration because you have to crawl into the software to understand how the software thinks. Now, I'm sure that if you have suggestions, just discuss them with Ms. Farrell or Ms. Ing, and we'll see what we can do to implement the suggestions. We post lots of stuff, and
That's
because we do post lots of stuff, some people get confused about what it is we post and how it's posted, because there's so much of it there.
that's right.
But the reason there's so much of it there is we want everything we do to be publicly available. And let me ask you one other question. Are you on the list, our email list of notifications that we send things to?
Is that on the website that I can click to say?
Yeah, it's on.
It is? I have not seen it, so I'll look more carefully.
It's
I
on the
mean, not
homepage.
every website is perfect, but I always look at, I can always improve. And I think that this is one area that we've seen that could be improved.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next,
How are you doing today?
fine, please introduce yourself.
My name is Todd Sliger, and sorry, can y'all hear me?
Yes,
Oh, can you hear me right there? My name is Todd Sliger, and background environmental science and communication. Some of the issues with the website, when I was just going on there to kind of prep for the meeting today, even a lot of the links that have information to download or to pull up to print off are in the same color font as some of the other things. It's all listed out, the same color font and everything. Any other website you go to, it's a different color for like a link to another website or something like that. And any web designer will tell you that that's easy, that's a quick fix, and that's a simple flaw. I'm sure you could go to Web Design by Austin Web Designers and find them, have other websites that they've done that with. So that's just one of the concerns. And then this being, kind of a public open forum and everything, there's no signs on the doors, there's no information outside the building to say this is where this is being held. And it's just by coincidence that it's on Quorum Drive. And then as far as, I don't know your name, but as far as the science and stuff that y'all talked about, y'all try to stick to the science and stuff like that. I kind of say this to a lot of people, but we can't identify everything in environmental science. To get 100% statistical significance, we'd have to conduct a study for these waste treatment facilities out thousands of years. So I guess I just ask you guys to err on the side of caution. because we can't prove 100% statistical significance, and you can't really do that until it's too late to do anything about it. So just keep that in mind. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
May
Next.
I add one more thing? I'm Susie Bell Gosley.
Mhm.
It's just a real obvious thing. Is there not name tag plates for each of you on this panel? And that helps us understand to have better communication with you. So it's just some simple things that facilitate process and makes it a more democratic society. So that's what I'm talking about, okay? Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Who else? Mr. Representative Burnham? Welcome back.
Let me add just one more thing, that is really very simple and obvious. There's no signage for either you or the room. I'm not on your email list, and there's no place to sign up to get on the email list at this public meeting. There are just fundamental flaws in your public process that should easily be accommodated by hiring one community organizer at $10 an hour for 3 months.
Thank you, Representative.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Harry.
Representative, do you have an iPhone that has the internet on it?
Yes.
You can sign up for an email list via your phone.
It's on the first page.
Top right.
Welcome.
Morning. Yeah, my name's Bill Maxwell. Yeah, I'm looking at your TCEQ website, and I look at the hot topics, and I look at past topics. And
Mr. Maxwell, we are not the TCEQ. They are here, but we are not TCEQ.
All right, sorry. But anyway.
That's all right.
Whoever, I do not see anything that has to do anything with nuclear, anything on, in any of that. So maybe it's my misunderstanding. I thought that, are they also involved in this?
The TCEQ, yes,
They're on their
and
website. Radio Materials Division.
Radioactive Materials
Okay.
Division.
But, you know, I know like every other agency, there's so much information it's hard to manage.
Exactly.
But I look at hot topics, I look at past topics, and you would not know from looking at that there anything that has to do with nuclear waste is within their purview. Everything is about wastewater, fresh water, mosquitoes, for crying out loud. And, you know, just go on, and there's not Barnett, the gases from the Barnett shale, but nothing would ever indicate to a casual, even somebody who was investigating, look at what's hot and past topics and what are we talking about? Nuclear waste is not in there. So if we have a modern equivalent of these reports that were unwieldy, that nobody would read, because now we've overloaded the system, but there has to be balance somewhere. So if that's part of your purview, then it should be at least within reasonable view. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Maybe I'll take your suggestion as providing links to, we could consider providing links to other agencies that deal with radioactive issues, and there are at least 2 other agencies that deal with those besides TCEQ. We are not a state agency, but if somebody comes to our site, we might be able to provide links to the
There's a couple
Railroad
on there now.
Commission and Department of State Health Services, as well as to the TCEQ's Radioactive Materials Division. Thank you. Ms. Haddon? Okay. Good morning. By the way, in case nobody knows, I'm Bob Wilson, and I'm chairman of the Compact Commission. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Valerie Reed, and I'm a public citizen. I grew up in West Texas and was born in Fort Worth, Texas, lifelong Texan, currently residing in Dallas, Texas. And I'm happy to be one of the few public citizens being represented at this meeting. And I do acknowledge the flaws with the process in terms of letting more people know so that they can participate in this very important public health issue that we are here this morning to regard. Now, along those same lines, I just want to say that from my understanding, the site in question for the disposal of perhaps high radioactive materials at the WCS site. When it was initially applied for a low-level radiation permit, it's my understanding that, in fact, it was not given the permit because of the concerns of the location of the site as being over two aquifers, one which is a secondary aquifer, which happens to spread from Texas up into the breadbasket of the United States of America, where most of our food grows. This is an incredibly important issue that would affect not only the people of Texas, but people in 5 other states. And where is their voice in this process, when in fact it could affect them as well as the people of Texas? Now, I understand, the proximity of the site as perhaps being convenient to transporting radioactive materials from New Mexico, as it being an important site in that regard. But what we're looking at now is expanding that for it to be imported from, wherever, basically. And what are the concerns now in terms of transporting these materials through these other places to get to this site? And I just want to also respond to the comments that you made, and if you had a name tag, I would
Jane.
know what your name is.
Jane.
Jan.
Jane.
This kind of stuck in my mind in what you were saying in terms of adequate science. Now, we all know that there's all kinds of science out there that can say pretty much whatever you want it to. In fact, how many people believe that there's such a thing as global warming? Okay, so that's just an example of science being adequate to say whatever you need it to say. And so when you're talking about issues with radiation and nuclear waste, okay, that doesn't go away, people, okay? It's a really important issue for us to look at with parameters that are far-reaching beyond the stockholders of a company or the profit of a private company that stands to benefit. And as Ms. Gosselin mentioned, the people who pay the cost are the private citizens. And that is why more citizens need to be here speaking to this issue. So these issues that they're bringing up with the website, and while they may seem small and insignificant in terms of the big issues that we're here to deal with today, the fact that we need private citizen voices on this it just puts it in a bigger frame, is what I'm saying. And so in terms of adequate science, what I want to get to is that we need to look at things from a bigger lens. For instance, I'm sure the people in Japan who were looking at their plans for Fukushima thought it was an adequate plan. But as it turns out, it's a disaster, and we all know that. It's a continuing disaster that basically they don't really know how to fix at this point. Do we want to create a situation like that in Texas because we thought we were being adequate with our science? We really have to be diligent to protect the environment because this is where we live, and we depend on it. So you can look at Katrina. Katrina is another example of where I'm sure the people who made the decisions on what should be done to that levee thought it was adequate. Okay, well, it turns out it was a disaster because they weren't planning for these big weather events. Where you look, they happen pretty much every year now, and so we used to think, 100-year flood, these kinds of terms, they don't really apply anymore because we don't know when the next big flood is going to come. So that's another issue that I want to bring up, is that this site is near the Colorado River, 10
Okay.
miles from the Colorado River.
Yeah.
And
And
we
I
have
don't
your
want to
floodplain.
totally cut you off, but you do know that this commission does not license the site. We don't license the site. TCEQ licenses the site. the legislature set the parameters for where it needed to be located. And so the application had to exist within the parameters set by the Texas legislature. And so all of those things, it's all part of the history of this thing. And we'll be glad to go into the history, but what you're really telling me, and what all of you all are telling me, and I had forgotten in my introductory remarks that we also had 2 meetings in Andrews, Texas, in the past of this compact commission, as well as in Austin, where most of our meetings are, and the meetings we've had in Vermont. It's good to hear from everybody with all of these concerns. Some of them we've heard often. And as Representative Burnham has reminded us, he's been reminding us about a lot of these issues constantly. And but what you are telling me is it's good to get out away from Austin and perhaps away from Andrews every once in a while to have meetings, and you're encouraging us to do that. Thank you for that. But if you could conclude rapidly, I would appreciate it.
Well, certainly. To respond to your clarification on the role that it's not about permits, if you could respond to what your influence is in terms of that process and the recommendations that this panel makes and the relevance there.
Our role is to receive, and what the legislature did is, and this goes back to something that Representative Burnham said, when the compact was originally formed, the reason for a compact was to defeat the operations of what's called, and I don't want to get too technical on you, but it's called the Dormant Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Because if Texas established a low-level radioactive waste site or a RECRA waste site or a municipal solid waste site without being in a compact, anybody from any place in the United States could use it. And so the way to overcome what's called the Dormant Commerce Clause in the U.S. Constitution is to have interstate compacts. Texas formed an interstate compact in 1993, that time with Texas, Maine, and Vermont. Maine subsequently dropped out. But the purpose was to allow Texas and Vermont, our partner, to have a site. Texas was always to be the host state to have the site. And the purpose was so that you could control the quantity of material that came in from other states to the site, making it primarily available for Texas and Vermont generators. The site was actually, the state, Texas, chose to develop the site under the auspices of what's now TCEQ. And there's a lot more history that I'm leaving out, and I'm sorry to just talk for so long. But when that happened, the legislature was forced into a decision to quantify how much material from non-compact, non-affiliated states would be allowed to come into Texas for disposal. And they set limits in Texas law governing the license of how much that stuff could be brought in. Basically, it's 30% of the initial license capacity. That's the limit. And it's on an annual basis, fiscal year basis now. And so our job is to allow agreements from people who choose to bring waste in from outside the compact to dispose of it at the site, to approve those agreements or not. And our job is also to allow people from inside the compact, because the compact requires that unless they have an agreement with us to allow them to ship the waste to some other place, they have to use the compact facility. And that's the other side of our agreement. So we have two things. We look at allowing exports of waste inside the compact out, and allow waste generated outside the compact to come into the compact facility. But the quantity of material is limited by the Texas legislature. Okay?
Okay, so those are the two specific parameters that this panel deals with.
Yes.
And in terms of the history of the site itself, that's kind of a dead deal, and y'all have absolutely no influence in that regard.
Right.
That's
Right.
pretty much true. About
Too
the only
bad.
thing we can do is, if we see a problem, limit material that may come into the site.
So do you think it's a good idea that they're expanding these capabilities of the site in question?
I don't know what you mean by expanding capabilities. I know that the
Bring
legislature's
in more materials from
entering,
outside sites.
well, the legislature has said how much the limits of those materials are. And there is a complicated reason for doing that that I won't get into, but the legislature made that decision.
So you're just,
We have to live with what the legislature tells us to do.
right. I hear you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
May I say
Ms.
something?
Sanders?
I think that's, I wanted to be clear that maybe I was misunderstood when I talked about the adequacy of science. I don't mean that the outside groups and legislators should be telling us whether or not nuclear waste is a good idea. I have my own perspective of that, and I agree in the larger context of things. I prefer the renewable energies. But I'm saying that if there's a problem with the site, even though it's outside our parameters, we provide oversight to some extent. And if there's a particular problem with the site, that makes sense. That's the kind of adequate science that I was talking about. We hear a lot of concerns that some of us have ourselves, and we try to monitor, and we try to provide the oversight. But it is not our role. Our role is prescribed, as the chairman said. I, for one, overstep that sometimes and ask the questions, because I think as a public entity, we need to do that. But we need to do it based on fact, and if we get inaccurate information, it actually just detracts from that. That's what I meant in terms of science. I think science is pretty clear on nuclear energy, unfortunately.
All
We're
right.
not.
Ms. Haddon?
Good morning, Commissioner. Can you hear?
We can.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Karen Haddon. I'm here on behalf of Seed Coalition. And thank you for your work. Some good issues have been addressed already this morning, and which is, I'm happy to see. And I will gladly work with you on some fixes on the website, because I ran into frustration this time as well. But the big issues of concern today, I know that all of you are well-educated and very, very knowledgeable in the radionuclide arena. And I know that you are watching things like the WIP site. What's been going on there over the last 2 months is a great concern to me. And the deafening silence, basically, in real information. I've been searching, I've been researching, and it is hard to get it. I have found things, and I've submitted them as as attachments to the Seed Coalition comments that talk about the WIP site being the gold standard. It was, the ultimate in safety, and it's won numerous awards for excellence environmentally and safety-wise. So here we are, 15 years into the life of that site, and even with all these credentials and expertise and sound engineering, we've got a leak going on. There are people who say that leak wasn't a one-time leak, that it continues, and they base that on data. So there's now plutonium and americium that has been tracked 26 miles away. There have been 17 workers exposed, and there's other workers now being tested. So my concern is this, is that it's just an illustration. We all know that there's differences in the nature of the site. We all know that they're handling things differently. It's a salt dome facility, all those kind of things. So we're not trying to equate the two. But where the similarity lies is that both of these sites take radionuclides like plutonium, which is incredibly deadly. If inhaled, it causes ongoing health problems, cancer and other things, and it can kill people. If that is a similarity there in the materials that are accepted. Although the WCS site doesn't take technically transuranic TRU waste, still these radionuclides can be present in the low-level waste. Secondly, WCS is always assuring us about the safety of the site, but the reality is that accidents happen. They can happen. Now to come back more specifically to a concern that overrides all of the applications that you're looking at today and have been looking at. The safety concern that I have that is basically based on the work of scientists is the concern about water at the site. It's an ongoing concern. We've raised it since day one with this commission. And I really appreciate you asking questions, Commissioner Sanders, because they need to be asked. And for at least 2 years now, both in writing and in oral testimony, I've been requesting that you as a commission ask the TCEQ as part of every single one of these meetings to give you an update on the monitoring well data. And you're not asking that. I've seen that happen in numerous meetings where the TCEQ representative will be up here and relay whatever information they want to relay to you, but nobody is saying, we want the water data and we want an analysis. My most recent analysis found that, and this was based on WCS monitoring well data, that you can get. I have to get it through open records request. You could probably get it more easily. It found 40% of the monitoring wells showing the presence of water. This matters because this is the very issue that the TCEQ scientists used as the basis of concern when they recommended denying the license for the site. Unanimously, they said it was not adequate and they had concerns about water contamination, and they made no bones about it. Their attitude was when it leaks and when it gets into water as opposed to if it will. And 3 of their employees actually resigned as a matter of principle over this licensing. These issues have not gone away. Now, it may be as much as 2 years ago now, we used to hear about pumping of water out of the site. We're not hearing anything about that anymore. Those reports need to be provided to you, and I am providing what I can come up with in the way of encapsulated analysis in the seed comments that you receive, because I understand it does take time to go through, but please do ask them. And this ties in with the WIP site. Okay, here you've got a great site with the WIP site, at least in terms of engineering and reputation and awards. Okay, the WCS claims are that this is also a really great site, that we won't have any problems, but already we have an Achilles heel, and it needs to be looked at so we can prevent things similar to the leak in New Mexico from happening here in any way, shape, or form. There might be differences. TCEQ, for their part, I just want you to know, is not doing their job. I find them to be asleep at the wheel. What used to, people mentioned their website, what used to be easy to find has become hard. What information used to be readily available is becoming more difficult. When we get amendment notices, we've got amendments on the agenda today, an update about that. When citizens go look for that, it takes you almost 10 days to find out the amendment number and which one we're talking about, because they have obscured it, and they'll put like 30 different amendments into one amendment. Things like, recently, now instead of a 150-foot dry line, now what we've got is that they can bury waste in the compact facility as long as they're not putting it directly into water. There can be standing water at the site. This is a massive change. And TCEQ is doing this, and there's almost no stopping them. These are often run as minor amendments where you can comment, but you can't do anything about it. And I hope that you're aware of the fact that never once, not yet, even a single hearing has been held, although Sierra Club has been requesting one since the start of this site opening, and it has never been allowed. So that's the opportunity to raise these issues in a legal setting, and that has not happened. We have other comments today, some will regard the process and so forth, and I'd like to leave you with some written materials. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haddon. I will know that Ms. Haddon emailed comments to us. They were received last night. We could not
Yeah, I haven't seen
print them out for our viewing today. And
Apologies for being so late.
yeah, so we just couldn't get to them.
Yeah, no, I understand.
But, so thank you for providing your written comments. Are there other people who care to address us on any topic? If not, we'll thank you, all of you, for coming to talk to us. And as I said, it indicates to me that perhaps we should consider holding meetings in various parts of the state in the future, as well as in Austin and Vermont, and even in Andrews County. We'll have to go back to, we will go back to Andrews County. The next item on the agenda, and I'm going to keep going, is discussion of revisions to Texas Administrative Code 675, 21, 22, and 23. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, and a number of you may not be, those three provisions are the rule that the Compact Commission passed on regulating applications for importation of waste into the compact for disposal. And another rule is exportation for processing and return to the compact. And the third rule is on exports, things having to do with exportation of waste that is generated inside the compact. And the background is, and I'm expanding this a little bit because a number of you, this is probably your first meeting. We were required by legislative changes in 2011, prior to the site opening in Andrews County, to adopt rules on various things and do other things, but rules dealing with importation and exportation of waste. And the commission did that, and at the time it did it, it said that nobody knew for sure how this process was going to work, so we had a reopener after a year to come back and look at the process of the way the rules were working, having learned about how the site works and the industry works. And that process of revising the rules began about, well, last summer with the designation of a committee. I'm on the committee and two other members of the commission are on the committee. We are in the process of still gathering information. And one of the things that we did is we wanted to hear from brokers and processors as well as generators of waste. And a lot of the brokers are in Tennessee and the processors of waste are in Tennessee. So we initially set up a meeting in Tennessee that was supposed to take place in January. It was not able to take place because it was canceled for several reasons. A couple of the committee members could not be there, and then we had weather events that would have prevented us from doing it in any event. That meeting is now scheduled to take place in Tennessee of the committee with brokers, processors, and generators in April. It's the week of April 14th, if I'm remembering correctly. And several of the commissioners will be there. The committee members who are going to be there are Linda Morris, Ms. Morris down there, and Dick Saudick, who's from Vermont. He's not with us today. And I think Mr. Salzman is also planning to be there. I will not be there for that meeting. I've got a conflict that week, unfortunately. But there will be three members of the commission there. And our desire is to get input from brokers, processors, about various issues dealing with disposal. For those of you, again, I'm just expanding a little bit. We've spent an awful lot of time on the question of disused sources. These are small radioactive devices that are used in industrial applications primarily. There are also some used in other types of applications. They have sealed radioactive material involved in them. And the only outlet for Class B and C seal sources for disposal for most of the states is the facility in Andrews County. And this has become an amazing issue because of homeland security issues, among other things. And the idea is that we need to collect all these things in one place and keep inventory. The estimate is that there are millions of them out there. Nobody even knows where they are. And so we're trying to address this to see how we can smooth the process, if it's possible to do that. One of the great problems of dealing with that, and the brokers are telling us this, is one of attribution. Because if people bring in waste into Texas for disposal, they have to have an agreement with us. And our agreements have to be with generators. And so the question is, if a broker has a bunch of these things in inventory, how do we manage to get an agreement with the person who originally generated it as waste? And it's those types of issues that have been occupying a bunch of our time. These can be high curie content, but relatively low volume materials. And so it takes, as I've observed in the past, a lot of time to deal with a relatively small volume of material, although the curie content can be quite high. And we have to balance all those things because the limits set by the legislature are both on volume and curie content. So we pay attention to the curie content of the materials coming in to the site for disposal. So we are continuing that process. What we plan to do after the meeting.
Chairman, if you don't
Yeah,
mind
Mr.
my asking.
Sure, Mr.
I
Byrne.
really appreciate the information, and I'm wondering what portions of the field trip will be open to the public and where we can get more specific information.
Lee, Mr. Representative Burnham wants to know what portions are open to the public. We've been trying to generate a list of participants, and it turned out that originally it was planned just to be with specific brokers and generators. They're primarily the ones that are involved in the meeting because we want their direct input. I don't know if it's generally open or not. It's not a meeting of the commission, obviously.
I understand that, and I appreciate the information exchange, but I'm inviting myself as a former member of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee of the Texas House of Representatives, who was very involved in some of these conversations and issues at committee member level. So I just want to know the more specific when and where I might be welcome, as opposed to just inviting myself.
Lee, do you want to address that?
I don't know.
This is an issue that we haven't, this is an issue that we haven't talked about as a commission yet, either with our Attorney General or with you or with the Rule Committee. So we haven't specifically answered that yet.
Now, as I said, the Rules Committee it started with a direct input to visit 2 sites in Tennessee and to hear from specific brokers. Not even the waste facility operator initially were involved, either one of the ones that generally take.
Well, I'm inviting myself in my capacity.
I understand you're inviting yourself to your capacity. The problem is the meeting can get very unwieldy. And we wanted it to be both information gathering and small originally, but it might have been, it might be exploding beyond our desire, and I'm just wondering if we can still accomplish what we need to accomplish.
I think it's a matter that we should probably discuss and look at the pros and cons for how we operate this meeting and get word out, I think.
We certainly don't mind telling you when it's going to take place and where. I mean, there's no reason why we can't do that. Whether there's an open invitation or not is, if somebody wants to show up.
I can understand the constraints. I'm inviting myself as a member of the Texas House of Representatives, not as a general member of the public. And it has been a long time concern of mine, just exactly the nature of the relationship with the brokers and what may lead to international importation of the resources, which is contrary to the best interest of both the citizens of Vermont and Texas. So I kind of like to be there. So consider yourself invited to invite me.
We will note your comments.
Other, okay?
We will note your comments, Representative Burnham, sorry. Okay. And as I was saying, after that meeting, I expect to call a session of the Rules Committee that is involved in drafting the rules to start considering the topics, first of all, of things we want to address, and perhaps to start discussing specific wordings on various things. At this point, we've got some other things that have been added to our agenda since we started that may come into play as a result of some changes. I will tell people that what we're trying to do, and I've said this, is to gain an understanding of how the industry actually works, how the generators generate the stuff, how they arrange for shipping, what the shipping requirements are, what the timing has to be related to the shipping, so that we can do what has been requested of us, which is to maximize, to the extent possible, the amount of waste that is authorized from out-of-compact sources to come into the compact. And it is a system that we don't fully understand because we're not fully informed yet about what brokers, generators, and the disposal site operators have to go through to accomplish, physically accomplish, the logistics of doing shipping, and there are lots of reasons for that. We're trying to improve our understanding. And so that is one of the reasons we decided specifically to go seek the information out, so we have a better understanding of the process, so we can be more informed when we come to drafting rules that we might want to revise in our existing rules. We don't have to make any revisions whatsoever, but we think we probably will in a number of respects. And we spend an extraordinarily large amount of time dealing with seal sources, as it turns out, because, and I'm going to say one other thing, there is only one other site of the non-compact states, and there are a total of, I think, 36 unaffiliated states who are not in compacts, or who are in compacts, but the compact that they are in does not have a site. Texas is one of 4 sites that is capable of receiving low-level radioactive waste. The others are in Barnwell, South Carolina, and Hansford, Washington. Clive, Utah also has a facility, but the Clive, Utah facility is limited to what they can do. They're limited to Class A materials, and they cannot take even Class A seal sources, although currently they're in the midst of a 1-year exemption granted by the state of Utah to allow them to take Class A seal sources. But that, under what's called the scatter program, which is organized by the Conference of Radiation Control Program Directors. There's so many of these things out there, we don't even know where they are. We're trying to collect them, get them inventoried, and get them into one place and under control. It's a interesting program to try to get a hold of, because in the past, these sources were generally made available. A lot of them are held by and used by people under what's called a general license. They don't even have to be registered. They are identified, so we don't know where a lot of them are. And we're trying to figure all that out collectively as a system of dealing with radioactive materials, so we can get them inventoried and available to us. And all this is part of the same project. Believe it or not, that the small quantity of these materials has overshadowed a lot of what we do. And so we'll go from there. So generally, the rules after the meeting in April, I intend to call a meeting of just the Rules Committee where we will gather and collect our thoughts about what we might want to do. We would be leading up to a draft at some point of revisions in our rules, and perhaps a new rule that we would then bring back to the full commission for its consideration. The commission would have to approve it in a forum before we would ever go public with it. Once it went public, it would be public. We would make an announcement, of course, that it's public. We'd have to publish it in the Texas Register. We'd have a comment period where we would deal with it, and we'd have a rules hearing, and there would be public input certainly allowed in the rules hearing, and we may have a meeting again. We've had one public meeting dealing with it. We may have another public meeting before we ever publish a rule. It's a process that may take through the rest of this year, and I'll tell everybody that. But we're learning, we learn more all the time. I learned more last week, and I'll talk about this in a minute when I give my report. So we don't have anything other than that to give you an update. And so with that, we're through, unless there are questions from the commission. We're through with item 5, and I think we're going to stop just for a few minutes and give everybody a chance to stretch their legs, and then we'll go into the applications. Thank you. We'll be back in about 10 minutes, which means in this group customarily it means 15.
Very nice to meet you, Susie.
We've met before, one of these.
Yes, we have.